Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lover Girl. In previous episodes, I've talked about a lot of connections that I've had. However, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a particular connection that was quite special to me. So last year, I had invited my girlfriend, Kayla, who is from my hometown, to come out and see me so we could take a road trip together and watch a country concert in the next state over, specifically to see Morgan Wallen. So I know that she listens to this type of music. However, she had never heard of Morgan Wallen before, but she was completely down to fly over and join me, which was really exciting because I only gave her like a 2-week notice. So she made a short 3-day trip to fly out and see me. And the day that she flew here, we decided to go downtown and get a hotel room and just have a fun girls' night out in the city. So we head straight to the hotel from the airport, and when I had booked this hotel room, I had intentionally booked a hotel that was 2 blocks away from Jacob, in hopes that there was a slim chance that I would bump into him. So we settle in and decide to check out the city. We're checking out different places and getting a little shopping done, and then we decide to go back and get ready to head out to dinner. And I'm really excited. I had not been going out much, so the thought of me getting ready, getting dressed up, and going out with a girlfriend seemed like so much fun. I had a really good feeling about the evening. I felt cute. I was really feeling myself, and I had a strong feeling that I was probably going to meet someone. I had great energy, and I just had a positive outlook about the evening. So Kayla and I went to dinner that night, and we were having so much fun. And we're also trying to figure out some other places we could go to after dinner to have more drinks. So I recalled seeing a photo on Instagram which Jacob was tagged in. He was in a bar with a couple of his friends, and I realized that this bar was just a few blocks from where we were having dinner. So I suggested to Kayla that we head over to this bar in hopes that I would possibly bump into him. When we get there, Kayla was very hesitant to walk in, saying that it was just not her scene. I was a bit disappointed that she wasn't willing to go in. However, it was her first time visiting, and I wanted her to have a good time. So we ended up leaving and trying to find a new place where we could have some drinks. So we continued to walk down the street, and we came across this little standalone building, which looked like an interesting spot. I had passed by this place a few times, and I had always been curious to go in. So before we walked through the doors, there were a couple of men who were walking out. I asked them how it was inside, and they told me that it was all right, but they were heading to another bar just a couple blocks down the street. And they suggested we join them. But I said that we were going to check this place out and maybe we'd meet up with them later. To me, this place seemed like a hole-in-the-wall bar. The decor seemed messy, and there were just things plastered all over the walls and on the ceiling. So I asked Kayla, are you sure you want to stay here? You don't want to go to that other place those guys were going to? And that's when she told me she didn't feel comfortable leaving with those men. So we both sat at the sticky bar, drinking a couple of Red Bull vodkas. And she's looking around and she tells me, I keep seeing the word twins. I think it's a sign. I sort of brushed off what she said and told her, people probably think we're twins, or sisters at least. So I turned around thinking I would ask the first person I saw. And behind us, there were 2 tall men along with their friend who was slightly shorter than them. So I leaned into the shorter friend who was closest to us and I asked, do you think we look like twins? Now, the environment that we were in was so loud that he could barely hear me, so he said, huh? With a confused look on his face. So I tried to project my voice a little louder, and I said, do you think we look like sisters? It seemed like he had no idea how to answer that, so he just responded with, yeah, with a questioning look. And that's when Kayla leaned into him and asked him a question. I noticed how he moved closer towards her, and by observing his body language, to me, it seemed like he was more interested in what she had to say. So at this point, it was his 2 taller friends in front of me. I asked them how old they were, and they mentioned to me how they were 30. So I'm thinking, okay, these guys are younger. They're about 5 years younger than me. So the shorter friend was posted up against the bar, standing next to Kayla. Then his 2 friends gravitated towards him. So Kayla and this man were having a conversation, and I decided to head to the restroom by myself. When I came back, I saw that she was still talking to them. I went back to where I was originally sitting, and I noticed how this man was looking at her. By his gaze, I could tell that he was into her. I felt a little left out while being at the end, so I decided to chime in on their conversation. This guy that Kayla was speaking to mentioned that he was flying over to the next state to see the Morgan Wallen concert. And I was pretty surprised by this, mentioning to him that we were driving over for the same reason. So this guy was clearly inebriated, as if he had been drinking all night. It was obvious by looking at his rosy-colored cheeks and his red nose, along with his glossy eyes and a bit of slur to his tone. So I asked him what they had done that night, and he mentioned that they went to go see Hardy, which is interesting because I knew that Hardy was opening up for Morgan Wallen the next night, but I had no idea that he was in town. So I said to this man, "Why didn't you take us to the show?" And he responded in his drunken slur with, "I didn't know you ladies earlier." He did make a good point, but I thought about how much fun it would have been if we had met him earlier that evening and we all could have gone to the show together. I asked him what he did for a living, and he told me that he worked in construction. So I asked if I could see his hand. He rested his hand on the bar, and I began circling his palm with my fingertips. Then I said to him, "Your hands are rough, like the Taylor Swift song." He had no idea what I was referring to, but I just giggled, and I suggested to Kayla that she feel his hand too. Then he drunkenly said to us, "You're the girls from my dreams," which was so funny because our friend Carter had said the same thing to us. And when he did, Kayla joked that it was his wet dreams. So when this guy said this to us, I responded in a cheeky tone saying, "From your wet dreams?" And he was pretty taken back when I said that. I mean, it was an inside joke, but he obviously didn't get it. Kayla and I were just giggling so much, and he just seemed so easygoing and basically just went with whatever we were saying and whatever we were doing. However, when the three of us were speaking, I still noticed the way that he was looking at Kayla. At one point, he caught me staring at him, looking at her, and he winked at me as if he was communicating that there is this beautiful woman in front of him, but he sees me too. So this guy seemed like a country boy. He had brown hair, which was grown out and peeking through his backwards trucker hat. He was wearing a tight black shirt with tight gray pants, and it was clear to see that he had a thick, sturdy build from his fitted clothes. So at this point, I had already had a few drinks, and I was observing his look and his behavior. Then I suddenly blurted out, "You look like Morgan Wallen." And when I said this, Kayla took a look at his bill and she read his name on the bottom of the receipt. And that's when she called him Jacob Wallen. So I said, "Wait, your name is Jacob?" And he said, "Yeah." I was surprised that his name was Jacob also. So we began calling him that name that Kayla had given him, and he willingly played along, laughing with us while we joked. I then noticed Jacob's friends get up, and one of them began speaking into his ear, while Jacob nodded his head, gulping a cup of cold iced water. I assumed that they were all about ready to leave, so I began finishing up my drink, thinking we should probably head out as well. I then saw Jacob's friends walk away from him while he stayed at the bar with us. So I asked Kayla what they were doing, and she told me that they were leaving. I was so confused by this because Jacob was clearly so drunk, and I wondered why in the world would his two friends ever leave him alone like that. So at that point, I felt really bad for him. So I walked over to him, and I was basically in between him and Kayla. I took the cup of water, and I began feeding it to him. I brought it over to his mouth and told him, "You need water. You need to drink this." At this point, I was pretty concerned for him. Like, if your friend were ever to be in this shape after drinking, it would not be okay to leave your friend like that. So while I'm doing this, I turn to Kayla and say, "He is so drunk, we need to figure out a way to get him home." So Kayla actually had his phone and was calling his friends, telling them he's really drunk and we needed to figure out a way to get him back safely. So while she's on the phone with them, I'm having a conversation with Jacob. So the three of us were pretty drunk, but we weren't as wasted as he was. He says to me, "Your friend is sexy as fuck." So I turn to Kayla and I tell her what he had said to me, and she just laughs. So we're all really just having fun still. And I'm rambling, going on, talking about whatever is coming to mind. And he's going along with whatever I'm saying. Then he wraps his arm around me and squeezes my butt. And then I shamelessly whisper into his ear, I've only had sex once in the last 14 months. And then he just laughs and we're both giggling. And Kayla's actually using his phone to take photos of us. And I am just having a grand old time with these two. So I head back over to where I had initially been sitting and start drinking a cup of water so I can sober up myself. And that's when Kayla tells me, okay, we're gonna leave now. We're gonna get him an Uber home. So I said, are you serious? And she is just insistent on helping him. But I agreed because, again, I felt bad that his friends just left him there. However, when she said this, I had other plans, and I felt like the night just wasn't over. So I suggested that we go to another bar near our hotel, and then we'll get him an Uber home. So that's when I took Jacob's hand and began walking down the street, leading the way for the both of them. And the three of us began holding hands like little school children going on a field trip. And Kayla and I just couldn't stop sniggering, calling him his given name for the evening, which was Jacob Wallen, while Kayla continued to record us on his phone. We were being very lively and high-spirited, while he was more timid, really just observing us and our behavior. So we continued to walk down the street until we realized that the walk to our hotel was pretty far. And that's when Kayla decided to get us an Uber. So while she's setting up this arrangement for our ride, I bold-faced asked him, have you ever been with two brown girls before? Such an out-of-pocket question. But he answers with, yeah. However, even though I asked this, I had no intention of getting with him. It was just something stupid that spilled out of my mouth. I had been drinking and I was really just teasing him. So once our Uber arrived, the three of us squeezed into the back seat. And then I asked the Uber driver, do you know who Morgan Wallen is? The driver said he did not. Then I said, well, we're taking him home tonight. And Kayla and I just laughed uncontrollably. He must have thought we were crazy. Once the driver dropped us off, I took Jacob's hand and I said, let's go to the bar across the street. But Kayla suggested that we get him an Uber home. However, I was determined to go to this bar because I so badly wanted to see if I could bump into the original Jacob, because this bar was just right across the street from where he lived. I just wanted to try. I wanted to make that effort. Everywhere we went that night, I looked around, hoping I would see him. And this felt like the last opportunity of the evening to see if I could actually catch him somewhere. So I'm walking alongside this new Jacob. I placed my hand on his shoulder and I asked, how tall are you? He said 5'10". I asked him, with those boots? Before he could answer, I told him, you should round up, so tell me you're 6 foot. Then he said, no, I'm not going to lie about my height because I'm not a piece of shit. And I completely ignored him and said, okay, so round up. The things that were coming out of my mouth, I felt like I couldn't control. But the words that were being said to me, it was still processing. So when he had said this, I thought, okay, maybe he's a stand-up guy because he doesn't want to lie about little things like that. Anyway, we get to this bar and the manager of the bar is actually leaving, mentioning that the bar just closed up. So I asked if there was anywhere else we can go. I told him I wasn't too familiar with the city. So he asked Jacob if he knew where a certain bar was. When Jacob responded, his words were so slurred, I couldn't even comprehend what he was saying. So I said, okay, we should probably end the night. Our hotel is right across the street, so let's go. So I began skipping across the empty street in my boots. I still have so much energy. And right in front of our hotel, there was this outside stage area. It looked like a place where they held events. So I sat down and I handed my phone over to Kayla and I said, take a photo of me. So she took my phone and she started snapping pictures of me. And then she pushes Jacob over and says, go join her, take photos with her. So I looked over to him and he said, okay. So he sits right next to me and we were taking really fun photos. Kayla and I are just laughing, and Jacob is sitting closely to me. He has his arm around my shoulder, and we're all really just being so silly. We got to the hotel, and there's this area with some food and drinks we were able to purchase. And we all had been starving, so we got a few bags of chips, and I handed over a Gatorade to Jacob, telling him that he should drink that. So we struck up a conversation with the receptionist. And again, I joked that we met Morgan Wallen and we brought him home. She gave him a suspicious look and asked what his real name was. When I looked at him, he was just standing there quietly, like he looked nervous. So I thought that we should go up to the room so that he could feel more comfortable. So we got to the room, and I honestly wanted to see where or who he would gravitate towards. So the layout of this room was, there was a living room area with a dining and kitchen all linked together. And Kayla had all of her things out there because there was a pull-out couch and she was planning on staying out in the living room, while I stayed in the bedroom, which was where the vanity area and bathroom were. So I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed to charge my phone with my back facing the door. While I'm in the bedroom, Kayla and I are communicating, and I can hear Kayla telling Jacob, "You're gonna sleep in the room tonight." So I turned around to see if he would walk in, but he didn't. He was just out in the living room with Kayla. So when I noticed this, I said out loud, "No, he's gonna sleep out in the living room with you." So the both of us are going back and forth about this. And then Kayla walks into the bedroom and Jacob follows right behind her. Then I hear her say, "Jacob, you should sleep in here." And once again, I said, "No, he's sleeping in the living room." She completely ignores what I said, then tells him to lay down. Jacob didn't hesitate to plop himself right in the middle of the bed. Meanwhile, I'm still sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling through my phone with my back towards them. Then I heard Kayla ask Jacob, "So what do you do?" I butted in and said, "He works in construction. That's why his hands are so rough." And Jacob just agreed with a, "Yeah." Then she starts interrogating him, and he's just answering every single question. So I'm listening to the conversation, and she's like, "Are you married?" "No." "Are you engaged?" "No." "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No." "Do you like anyone?" No." "When was the last time you had sex?" And he's like, "To be honest with you, about 3 weeks ago." I was so shocked by this conversation. I couldn't believe how ballsy she was to be asking all of these questions. And then I heard her say, "Do you make 6 figures?" So that's when I turned around and I was like, "Kayla, you can't ask people that." And she's like, "What? I ask everyone these questions." And Jacob's just sitting there looking at her like, "Yeah," still feeling the need to answer her. At this point, I had turned around to join in on their conversation, and I'm looking at him, and again I say, "You look like Morgan Wallen. Sing for me." And I was literally waiting for him to start singing, but he did nothing. So I said, "Sing." And he just looked at me like he was stumped. He didn't know what to do. Mind you, I was 3 sheets to the wind, intoxicated. So I lifted his sleeve and said, "You have a tattoo right there. What does it say?" So he explained to me what it was, but I wasn't paying attention. My attention span was really short at this point. And that's when I pulled up his shirt, poked his belly button, and said, "Boop." And Kayla's like, "What are you doing?" I couldn't help but laugh. Why did I do that? I don't know. So that's when we got back to the subject of where he was going to sleep. And again, I was like, "You're going to sleep in the living room." And Kayla again said, "No, you're sleeping in here tonight." And to be honest with you, sure, Kayla and I could have just slept in the bedroom while he slept in the living room, but we weren't sure who he was really feeling. So what we were doing was we were really pushing him towards one another. So then I said, "Okay, this is how we're going to figure out where you're going to sleep tonight." I asked, "When is your birthday?" "Actually," he said, "my birthday was last night." So I'm thinking, oh, you were out celebrating your birthday. So it made sense why he would have been drinking all night. And then it popped into my head like, oh, you're an Aries. And I'm thinking, Kayla is a Gemini and he's an Aries, so they would be perfect together. And that's when I was like, okay, you need to go outside. But at the same time, Kayla said, "Okay, scoot over. We're all gonna sleep here." I was a little confused when she said this, but at the same time, we were all having so much fun together. It felt like I was with my 2 besties. So if we were all just gonna have a big slumber party in my bed, I didn't mind. And I wasn't thinking of this in a sexual way at all, because I had known Kayla for decades and she's basically like a sibling to me. But I was feeling comfortable with the both of them, that I didn't mind if we were all gonna just snuggle up together. So I said, okay. That's when she told us she was gonna get ready for bed and asked if she could take a shower first. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So while I was on my phone, I found the picture that the three of us had taken earlier that night. And it was the three of us at the bar, and we all had huge smiles on our faces. I ended up posting that photo to Instagram, and I captioned it, Jacob Wallen. So I took my phone and I leaned back and was like, look at this, showing him the photo that I had just posted. He laughed and told me he loved it. So then I walked into the living room and I started going through my luggage to find some clothes I'd change into. I began undressing in a view where Jacob was able to see me. I slipped off my underwear from underneath my dress and put a new pair on. And I slipped into some sweatpants, then removed my dress and slipped into a tank top right before I removed my bra from underneath my clothes. In my peripheral vision, I could see Jacob watching me while he sat up on the bed with his mouth slightly open. I walked over to my side of the bed and I asked if he needed a toothbrush, and he's like, no, I'm good. And then I was like, move over, give me some fucking room on my bed. That's when he immediately scooted over while still giving Kayla some room on the opposite end of the bed. So I positioned myself in a cozy spot right next to him, and I brought the comforter up to cover half of my face while I looked out the window. I thought about how close I was to the other Jacob, who was only 2 blocks away, wondering what he was doing, wondering if he was thinking about me. I was looking out the big glass window where I could see the streetlights and the other buildings across from us. Suddenly, I felt Jacob move to his side, facing me. Then he slowly slid his hand across my stomach. At that moment, I thought to myself, what is going on here? Is this a friendly cuddle? So I sort of left it as it was. I was completely fine if he needed to cuddle someone because I had already been feeling comfortable with him. And if that's how he needed to rest, relax, or fall asleep, I was completely fine with that. But then his hand found its way to my breast, and then he started gently caressing it. So I turned my head to look at him, basically communicating, like, what are you doing right now? Without saying any words. And that's when he moved his face towards mine and kissed me. So I pulled away thinking, did that really just happen? Because that was the last thing I expected from him. In the beginning of the night, yes, we were being so silly and we were flirting, but in a silly, joking way. And throughout the night, I was being my authentic self, saying the silliest things, laughing like a hyena, acting bratty towards him, and really just not giving a fuck. Because in all honesty, I was thinking about the other Jacob the entire night. It wasn't like I was trying to be likable. It wasn't like I needed to behave properly because I didn't give a shit. I was being my authentic self. So when he made a move on me, I was thinking, wait, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to kiss me right now? However, the fact that he showed interest in me, even after I had been behaving wildly that evening, was very compelling to me because it felt as if he liked me for who I was, even if I was acting crazy that night. In a way, it warmed my heart. And I'm not gonna lie, it also turned me on. So I ended up kissing him back. And when I did, it felt nice. It didn't feel awkward. It didn't feel sloppy. It felt good. It felt comfortable. And I was enjoying it. And that's when I said to him, are we having sex tonight? Because I haven't had sex in a long time. And he's like, I mean, yeah, we can. We both laughed at that and continued to make out. And while we were doing so, his body was sort of hovering over mine as if he were sheltering me. And I felt so little and so protected being underneath him. And that's when Kayla walked out of the shower and saw us. And when she did, I basically wanted to hide. But Jacob's back was facing her. And the next thing she said was, all right, guys, good night. Then walked into the living room. So at this point, all of the lights were off except for the TV. So I said to him, close the door. So he quickly got up and shut it, then crawled back into bed. And then I asked him, do you have a condom? He said he did. So he jumped out of bed and started rummaging through his belongings. And while he was doing so, I'm thinking in my head, oh my goodness, is this about to happen right now? And I'm basically talking myself through it. I mean, I had been drinking, but I was sobering up at this point, and I was feeling fine. I was feeling comfortable with him. So he got back into bed and I asked him, well, do you have one? And he's like, no, I thought I did, but I don't. So I'm like, check again. He seems so obedient. Like he was just doing whatever I was telling him to. So he got back into bed and was like, I don't have one. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, I've been sexually deprived for months. I'm just gonna have to deal with the consequences later. So that's when he took his shirt off and I spotted a tattoo on his chest. So I asked him what it said. I could barely read it, but he reiterated it to me and then asked me, is that okay? Oh my goodness, this man, I thought he was so cute. Like, why is he asking me this? Why is he needing validation for something that is unchangeable about himself? So we start kissing and things start to get intimate. But I'm really self-conscious about my friend being in the next room. So I whispered to him, be quiet, she better not fucking hear you. So he's like, okay, in a soft voice. So we start having sex and I wasn't aware of this, but my back kept arching up because I was trying to prevent him from going in deeper. I could tell the bed was creaking. So I got out of bed completely naked and I stood right in front of the huge windows, pressing my body towards the glass while he held onto my hips. And he ended up finishing shortly after. So after we cleaned ourselves off, we got back into bed and I was laying in the same position that I had been earlier. Then Jacob wrapped his arms around me and held me close. It was like he knew exactly how to position his body next to mine. Then I felt him softly kiss my shoulder and the back of my neck, which gave me a little shiver. So at this point, we had been drinking, we had a long night, and we had sex, so I was pretty exhausted, but my mind was feeling restless. So I shut my eyes to try to ease my thoughts, while this man I barely knew was holding on to me. But at that point, he no longer felt like a stranger, and the connection that I was feeling with him felt organic and unforced. However, I was still feeling insecure about laying so closely to someone knowing that I snore. So we had been laying there for a bit, and then all of a sudden, I could feel Jacob wrestling underneath the sheets. So I turned to him to see if he was okay, and this man ended up getting out of bed, buck naked, opening the bedroom door. And while this was happening, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, thinking, is he gonna go out there and try to see Kayla? I'm thinking, what the heck is this guy doing? But I don't say anything. I'm just watching him closely to see what his next move is. Then I watch him walk from the bedroom door out to the front door of the hotel room, right into the hallway. And when he did that, my jaw dropped. Like, what the fuck? This man is still drunk. And when he did that, he quickly turned around and walked right back inside, back into the bedroom and shut the door and got back into bed with me. So I'm laughing at him, asking, what the heck are you doing? And he's just like, I don't know. Oh, this poor guy. So he pulls the covers back over him and we position ourselves to try to go back to sleep. So again, when we're laying there, I try to see if he makes a sound to see if he snored as well, but I wasn't hearing anything. So I wondered if he was actually sleeping or if he was as awake as I was. So I turned to him and his face is right there. So I kissed him on the lips, and to my surprise, he kissed me right back. And when he did, he began kissing me affectionately. It was so sweet. We started making out and then we went at it again. And once we were done that second time, I felt so beat. It was like a crippling feeling, like I couldn't move. And I had just been laying there with my eyes closed and my crazy hair sticking to my sweaty face. Suddenly, I could feel his fingertips gently brush my hair away from my face. After this, I was completely beat. But then he said to me, I could go one more round. And I ended up rolling my eyes at him because of the exhaustion I felt. So I said to him, I think you chose the wrong person. I think you should have gone out there with my friend because this is not me. I don't have this much sex. She likes to have a lot of sex, and so do you. I think you should go outside. And again, I was just saying whatever I was thinking out loud. I didn't have any filter. And when I had said this, he just stared at me so confused. And I just continued on and was like, go outside, go. So this is my natural instinct. With my past experiences and with who I am by nature, I do tend to do this. I instinctually push people away. I could hear myself speaking to him, but I couldn't stop the words coming out of my mouth. Because we had just been intimate, a part of me was scared to get attached to him. So telling him to leave was my defense mechanism. So when I had said this, Jacob just stared at me, baffled. But when I really looked at him, I could tell there was a hint of sadness in his eyes, and a part of me felt bad. Then he delicately said to me, what if I want to stay in here with you? When he said this, I can't lie, my heart melted, and I gave a little bit of a pout. So at that point, I decided it was okay to let my guard down and stop telling him those words and pushing him away. I actually admired his resilience towards me. So we laid there and I felt much more relaxed, and I allowed him to spoon me while I pretended to be asleep. But when I laid there, my stomach was growling because I was hungry, and I remembered the chips that we purchased. So I decided to carefully slide out of bed, and I whispered to him, stay right here, stay asleep, I'll be right back. While I gently patted the comforter over him, I wanted him to feel safe and comfortable, and I just wanted him to rest. So I shut the door to the room, and I sat with Kayla, and the two of us are just giggling about the night, laughing about how we took a drunk guy home. I was complaining to her that my back was really painful, and it must have been because we were having a lot of sex. Then I asked if she heard us. She told me she did, and I felt so embarrassed, but she basically brushed it off. It wasn't that big of a deal. When I decided to go back into the bedroom, I quietly opened the door because I didn't want to wake Jacob. But once I did, I saw him sitting straight up, wide awake, looking at me. He looked so nervous. He probably heard us laughing in the living room, thinking we must have been plotting something. I couldn't help but laugh. I thought he was so cute. So I crawled on the bed over to him and I kissed him. Then I looked out the window and I asked, do you think anyone can see us? And then he was like, no one can see us because of the glare. And then I said, can I ask you something? Do you know our names? This guy had no idea. So I said, okay, you don't need to know anything. I was actually kidding when I said this, but I also wondered, would it be best if he knew as little information about me? I didn't know where this was going to go. I didn't know if I was going to see him ever again. But after wondering this, I knew that I had felt comfortable with him, and he was being so sweet to me. So I did end up telling him my name, and we went at it. Once again, this time I was on top of him, thinking I could control the creaking of the bed. But then I got tired, so he ended up getting on top, and I told him to be quiet while I attempted to hold in my moan, but I couldn't help myself. And while we were doing it, I unintentionally called him baby. I had called the other Jacob that when we had sex, so it sort of felt natural in that moment. I could tell it took him by surprise, but he just continued on. So while we were going at it, the pressure that I was feeling was causing my back to rise because of his size, and that's when I realized what was causing my back pain. And once we were done, it took the breath out of me. So I felt relieved that that was the last time, thinking we didn't need to do it again. So it was very close to the break of dawn, and once again we tried to go to sleep. I listened in for snoring, but all I could hear from him were small snorts while he held on to me so closely in the most comforting way. When the sun began to rise and light up our room, I jokingly asked him, are you ready to go again? And he was like, the sun is already coming up. For some reason, I was not feeling sleepy at all. So I went into the living room to see Kayla, and we joked more about the evening. Then she mentioned to me that she took videos of us the night before, and it was on his phone. So I asked her how she did that, and she mentioned to me how Jacob had told her his passcode, and that's how she was able to contact his friends. So of course, I asked her what it was. She said it was all 8s, which was funny because it was very similar to mine. So she told me that she wasn't feeling well and thought she'd feel better if she'd head to the gym. So she asked if it was all right to use the bathroom. So I opened the bedroom door, warning Jacob that Kayla was heading in. I sat on the bed and complained about how my back hurt. That's when Jacob offered to rub my back. So I sat there excited to get a massage from him. Then he started moving his hand around on my back, as if he wasn't even trying. It was so ineffective that I wondered why he even offered to do that. So then I asked him where his phone was because I wanted to see the pictures from the night before. He handed it over to me with no hesitation. I typed in his passcode and immediately went into his gallery to see if there were any embarrassing photos I needed to delete. And low-key, I wanted to see if there were photos of other women. However, I didn't go in too deep. I had only seen photos from the previous night and pictures of his shirt that he had been wearing, which read, "All hoes go to heaven." So I'm browsing through and he's like, "Can I at least look at the photos before you delete them?" I giggled, saying, "No, you can't." Kayla ended up leaving the room to head to the gym, and I undressed to head into the shower, leaving the door slightly open. And shortly after, I heard a knock on the door. It was Jacob, and he said, "Can I join you in the shower?" I was still feeling a little sassy, so I said no in a stern tone, and he was just like, "Okay." Very accepting of my answer. Then I said, "I'm kidding, do you need a shower?" He told me that he could rinse off. So he got undressed and stepped in the shower. And when he did, he made an ooh sound, admiring my body. I walked out shortly after to just give him a little tease. So I got ready and put my clothes on. And when he got out of the shower, he wrapped a towel around his waist, walked right past me, and just plopped himself on the bed, watching me while I rubbed lotion on my body. So I asked him, "Are you ready for the day?" And he was just like, "Well, do you want to get back in bed and make out a little more?" When I looked at him, I just thought he looked so adorable. I couldn't resist. So I climbed into bed next to him, and that's when he hovered over me, removing his wet towel, and he began to kiss me. He pulled my tube top down and began kissing my breasts, then pulled my jeans down and began giving me oral sex. So I began thinking, this man is eager to please me. So when we began having sex, I felt relieved to finally be able to let out my moan. I looked up at the ceiling, thinking about how this Jacob was fucking me on the same street as the other Jacob, the one that I had been longing for so long. But this Jacob was actually present and making the effort to please me. Right before he finished, he rested his body on mine while he softly kissed my lips. I could feel all of his weight on me, but I didn't mind. I was actually comforted by his warmth. So when we got done, I called Kayla to see if she was still at the gym, but she ended up not going, and she was just in the lobby area talking to the receptionist. So I told her that Jacob and I were on our way to meet her for breakfast. Right before we were about to leave the room, Jacob grabbed my waist and he began kissing me. He noticed that the bill of his hat was getting in the way, so he turned his hat backwards and began passionately kissing me. I opened my eyes because truly I couldn't help myself. And to my surprise, he had his eyes shut while we were making out. And I wondered why he was doing this even after the sex was over. So we head out of the hotel room and we're just making small talk, talking about the evening and how his birthday was. Once we got into the elevator, there was a moment of silence as we waited for the elevator to go down. That's when we both realized that neither of us had pressed the button to get to the first floor. We both looked at each other and laughed. Then he wrapped his arms around me to hug me, as if it was adorable that I had missed that. So when we got to the first floor to meet Kayla, Jacob said to me, "So, can I get your number? My Uber is waiting outside." I looked at him shocked. saying you aren't going to have breakfast with us. I'm not going to lie, I felt a little bit disappointed. He said that he needed to get going, which I understood because his flight was leaving that day. Now, I didn't want to make the same mistake as I did with Charles, the drummer, so I took his phone and called my number. He surprised me when he kissed me in front of everyone before leaving. I was just gushing about him after he had left, and Kayla seemed really excited for me, really excited for us, and she thought it was sweet how he had been treating me. So the two of us sat down for breakfast, and shortly after, I received a text from Jacob, which read, "Thanks for all the fun," including a kissy face emoji, then said, "I'd love to see you again." Then I replied back saying, "I'd love that too."